Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay out there?
We can. I can.
That's good.
Well, we'll go ahead and get started. We got a lot to cover. I'm really interested in some of these updates and reports. Before we jump into that, I want to thank all the farmers and foresters and really everybody on the supply chain in between for the work that you've done in keeping the food and fiber supply chain going. And I want, we're still in the thick of this pandemic. I'm interested to see what Dr. Phil has to say and what some of the health data looks like. But I will point out that I believe these disease control preventative measures work. I know they do. I just want to give you one quick example of, and this was discussed at the Economic Recovery Group amongst the commissioners. So I don't know if you remember, but NASCAR had a race at Bristol Motor Speedway, probably, over a month ago now. North Carolina elected not to host that race in North Carolina, and Tennessee did host it. So Bristol Motor Speedway came up with a really good biosecurity plan for control and prevention of COVID-19, and they had, before face masks were even getting that popular, to where they had mandated face masks, they had social distancing, they had 20,000 in the stand instead of 140,000, and the health data is in. There were no cluster outbreaks of COVID related to that, as far as I can tell. So that does work. So we need to continue all our disease control preventative measures as we continue down this pandemic road. The big news is the Corona Agriculture and Forestry Business Fund that Governor Bill Lee and the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group has approved for $50 million. And this program is intended, or the focus is going to be on those ag and forestry businesses that receive little or no federal funding or support. And that's the target of the group. But it's I can't tell you how excited we are for the Tennessee Department of Agriculture and the Business Development Group to administer this program. It's much needed. There's whole sectors and whole businesses within ag and forestry that are deeply suffering and affected by COVID, that haven't had much financial relief, and we're excited about the opportunity to help them. So Keith Harrison, who's Assistant Commissioner of Business Development, and his team will be administering this program, and he's got a presentation to explain it. So, Keith, are you ready?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
What's the deal with the Smokey being up there on the screen a while ago?
Hey, we're going to have a football season. All right. We're excited about that. All right, you should have my first slide now, Dr. Hatcher. Can you see it? Coronavirus Agricultural Forestry Business Fund.
We're good.
I see it.
Okay. All right, just making sure. You guys bear with me. I'm technology challenged. This is a program that we've been working on for the last 6 weeks, back and forth with the governor's office as well as the Department of Finance and Administration. This program is created. It's the CARES Act that we've all heard about on the national level. It's a $150 billion appropriation to make payments for specific uses in states, tribal governments, territories, and large units of local government. And the U.S. Treasury Department is allocating these funds based on a methodology relative to the state's population. As you can see, the U.S. Treasury got the funds to the state of Tennessee. The state of Tennessee got $2.36 billion to be allocated to it based on our population, of which Governor Lee, and we are so glad that he made the decision to put $50 million for agricultural and forestry purposes. Okay, so we have $50 million in our fund. The fund is designated for, as I said, agricultural and forestry businesses. And it is created, as Dr. Hatcher said, to give preference to folks and businesses who have not received COVID-19 funding. one aside with this that I want to make sure folks are aware of. You know, those of you that know me, I'm a part-time beef cattle producer. I run about 80 mama cows on our farm operation in Wilson County. I received money from the CFAB program through USDA Farm Services Agency. I can still, granted, I can apply for this program, but look, I'm not going to be a priority. This is not targeted towards me as an individual beef cattle producer that's selling calves at the local market. And, you know, but hey, anybody can apply, but it's targeted towards those that have not necessarily received funding and that are hurting worse than me on my operation. The application period, we're right in the middle of it, August 17th through August 31st. Got a lot of stuff to do in this period. The online application has been up, and we've been receiving applications for this since Monday, but it runs through August 31st. We'll be then ourselves, the Department of Agriculture and the Business Development Group, along with Horn, who is an outside consulting group that's working with the state of Tennessee, will be evaluating these applications from the first part of September, and then we'll notify applicants that have been approved and ones that were not on September the 15th. And they'll have from September 15th through October the 31st in order to be getting all their stuff in line, shall we say, their paperwork into us so we can begin dispersing money. But all these monies have to be spent by the end of the year. December 30th is the deadline. The funds must be used within the following categories: business disruption. Yes.
Back up one slide.
Hey, I did it.
Okay. So I will point out that October 31st date is in there early. So if we can effectively and efficiently and properly get this money out there where it's needed, there may be a look at getting some more money. So that's the reason that October 31st date is there. So there's a chance we could have another cycle if we do this right.
And Dr. Hatcher, I would add that those agritourism operations, they make their money from September through October. And we're working with them. They're not going to know how much they lose until October 31st. And we're going to work with them to make sure that they're able to qualify based on their income last year. And Casey Troop from our business development staff's already in touch with them and working with them to make it happen. That's one reason that October 31 deadline is there. So these funds must be used for either business disruption, costs associated with the pandemic response. In other words, if a processor had to do more personal protection, had to buy more personal protection equipment for their employees, or if a farmer's market had to put some measures in place and it cost them more in order to run their market so that they could still have safety for the vendors, for the employees, as well as for the folks that are buying from them. That's what that is. Supply chain enhancement. This is, you know, directly because of the COVID-19, things that had to be put in place or that need to be put in place to keep things running in the future. And this is a big category for us. And then, of course, we know the meat industry was adversely affected, so we have them called out that we're wanting to increase our meat processing capacity in the state. The funds must be distributed on a reimbursement basis. And also, we're going to, as you might imagine, any state or federal program, there's appropriate documentation that must be provided in order to receive payments. Examples of industries in agriculture and forestry that would be part of this program that we're targeting and calling out: agricultural fairs, events, and expos. You know, a lot of fairs got canceled and they still have to, they're incurring expenses. So we're expecting them to be stepping up and applying. Events and expos. Exporters, you know, those exporters have been hit really, really hard, particularly in the forest products area. And we're wanting to encourage them to apply, and we're working to that regard. Agritourism operations, a lot of them did well in the spring with Pick Your Own, but we're concerned about what's going to happen with agritourism folks whenever you look at the fall time period, whenever there's not going to be field trips this time. So we're concerned about them. Cheese processors, community food kitchens, commodity groups. If a commodity group normally has events or expos that got canceled, they need to be looking at talking with us and applying. Co-packing businesses, perhaps cotton gins, craft breweries, distilleries, farmers markets, food distributors, food processors, forest product manufacturers, grain elevators, hemp processors, horse trails, horticultural producers, and especially crop producers. Whenever we were setting this up, they were not covered under the USDA CFAB program. I'm in talking with Mike Mayfield to make sure if they're covered under the CFAB program, they need to be going ahead and applying and figure that out before they apply with us. There could be some of those that are not covered. Talk with us and we'll be glad to work with you because we'd sure like to see you get some relief. Livestock and horse shows, loggers, meat processors, milk processors, sawmills, as I said, especially crop producers, transportation providers, urban industry, ag businesses serving food deserts, wineries, and then there's that big other category. If you're involved in ag and forestry, you fall in that category. And if you've experienced a loss or you wanting to enhance your supply chain, get with us. We'll be glad to work with you. There's the website that's on the bottom of each one of these slides, tncaresact.tn.gov/TDA, that you can get more information. The applicants must be a Tennessee entity or have a project based in Tennessee. That's an important thing. There could be some out-of-state folks that would be applying. That's fine as long as the project is based and impacts Tennessee. They must demonstrate they've incurred a business loss. They have to have expenses that address unique problems created by COVID-19 and the ability to expand capacity in the industry they're in where demand has been increased because of COVID-19. And the applicants must agree to have electronic transfer of funds. This is an online program. Why don't we have paper applications? We can't. We just got a 2-week application period, and that's the only way we can do it. If folks need help applying, you can work with us at the Department of Agriculture, work for your local extension agent. They're there to help too, but we'll be glad to get that moving forward. What's next? We've already had one webinar on Tuesday, August the 18th. We got another one in tomorrow on how to fill out the application. And Horn, our consulting group, is conducting those webinars. Dr. Hatcher's on them as well as myself to answer questions. Then we have another one on August the 24th, next Monday. If we need to have more webinars, we'll do it. We just need to hear from folks, and we're glad to pursue to that end. With that, I'd be glad to entertain any questions. We've already had outreach to Farm Bureau, to University of Tennessee Extension. I've got a webinar with Farm Credit after this call. We're talking to Tennessee Farmers Co-op. Our consultants are working with commodity groups to get the word out to them. And we're glad to do whatever we can, but we need everybody that's on this call to put the word out in their respective industries. And if we can help give PowerPoint presentations or whatever, we're glad to do that. Dr. Hatcher, I'll take any questions.
Yeah, there's one in the chat box, in the chat room there. Keith, you see it? Leave it up to Max to ask a good question there.
I don't see it. You bear with me. I'm trying to get out of this sharing.
Okay, so I'll read it to you, and you can answer it, or I will too. Does the money need to be sent to producers by December 31st, 2020, or does it just need to be transferred to the Department of Ag by that time?
It needs to be sent to the producers.
Yeah, my understanding is they need to be under contract and spending that money, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be the case. It's the intention, and you guys bear with us. We've got some mixed signals on this particular question. It's the intention. They need to have a project that can be completed by December 30th. If something happens, there is the possibility of Horn and us working with that particular business, but everything needs to be in place so that this project can be completed by December the 30th.
Yeah, and I'll point out a couple quick things. So this is not like the small business relief program that was based on sales tax within the state. So the state of Tennessee already knew how much sales tax had been paid in, and so they based their money that went out based on their sales tax that company or entity had sent in. This is based on it's all a documentation thing. You have to be able to document a COVID loss or expense, right, Keith, some way that you're strengthening or impacting the food or fiber supply chain. So if you've already received, say if you had $130,000 loss per se, and you've already received $90,000 in federal funding, you're not going to get any more than what your total loss was. And it is also a net profit thing. It's not going to be based on gross income. So because if you're not operating an agritourism operation, you're not going to have the expenses, but you're still going to show the net loss from what the previous year was. So it's going to be based a lot on documentation. In the online application is fantastic. It's very interactive. It's got different questions based on the categories, and they'll be able to. Keith and his group will be able to sort out these applications and prioritize them fairly quickly, I think.
And this is a major undertaking for us. The Ag Enhancement Program, is a $21 million program. We had a few more dollars put in there last year, so it was up to 28. This is a $50 million program that just got announced on Friday, and we've got to get it all spent by December 31st. So we are working feverishly with all of my business consultants. This is their lives right now. It's my life, my assistant, Rachel Sullivan. This is what we're doing to make sure that Tennessee agriculture and forestry folks get access to these funds. It's a $50 million program. It's the biggest one that we've ever had the chance to manage in this division, and we're trying to do it right.
And then we also know that the forestry sector is really hurting, and they got no USDA money. So
You got it.
That's going to be a focus.
And also, I need to report too that David Arnold sent me an update this morning that they are working really, really hard with the Tennessee Forestry Association to make sure that folks are aware of this program and that have the opportunity to participate. Neil Owen, my business consultant working with the forest products area, has been on the phone, and he is out there working the industry to try to make sure that they get the opportunity to participate. Dr. Hatcher, they have hurt over in the forestry sector, and we need to provide some relief.
Yeah. And I also point out there's a business consultant for really every sector, isn't there, Keith? You've got a specialist that can handle the questions. I saw that on the website.
Yes, sir. We've got that on the website. It's specified with their email address. As you guys might imagine, Wendy Sneed, she's fielding questions and calls left and right when it comes to the meat sector. Casey Troop is working really hard with agritourism. Will Freeman's handling horticulture. Kyle Hensley's handling the wineries and distilleries and craft breweries. Whitney Flat's handling the exporters. Mike Brown is handling the food processors, and Debbie Ball and Grant Pulse are working with the fruit and vegetable folks. I think we got things covered. Lynn Williams is working with the fairs, but if you have any questions or any comments or any concerns that we're not covering something, please contact me. I mean, if you already have my email address, and I'm glad to respond back to you accordingly.
Yeah, and I'll also point out nonprofits can apply if they haven't been part of the nonprofit program that was already rolled out. Its application period already closed. So if they haven't got monies from that program, they can apply for this one.
Absolutely. I know we've reached out to AgriCenter. We're working with the farm wine growers and others if they've had losses. And I know those businesses have had losses, and we're looking forward to working with them so that they can have this opportunity.
Okay, here's a question from Farm Bureau. Does the entire project need to be completed, or just the portion the entity is getting reimbursed for? Example, if building a slaughter facility and reimbursement is for the building plans, the building foundation, etc., but the facility is not operational yet.
We'll work with you guys on a case-by-case basis. We really do need for what the project that you're applying for to be completed by the end of the year. Let's talk offline on a case-by-case basis, though, so that I realize it's a short window that we're talking about here, but let's just work on a case-by-case basis in that regard.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any further questions, and we'll move to John. Hold on. One more question.
It's not
a question.
does the loss of revenue have to be tied to agriculture? It needs to be tied to an agriculture and forestry business. That's what it's targeted towards. There's other programs for other parts of Tennessee's economy. And TSU will do our best to get the word out. I tell you what, we would love to have TSU support in this right here. We're glad to work with you guys. If there's anything, if I can do a webinar with you guys today or tomorrow, I'd be honored to have that opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Keith. And so I wanted to see if we get a hospitality update, and John's able to join us today. John.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Hold on, we got you on mute.
There we go.
There we go.
Good morning, Commissioner, and everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be back with you, and I appreciate you letting me go a little early in the conversation today, and I'll explain why. It has a lot to do with what Keith was talking about. As Commissioner Hatcher mentioned earlier, just like agriculture, tourism is still right in the thick of it right now. Our industry, while reopening, is still in some serious trouble. Restaurants, of course, across the state are open with diminished capacity in most cases, particularly in the metro areas. Lodging, which never actually closed during the pandemic, is still having some real issues with some of the metrics that are important for them to be able to be successful, like their occupancy rates, their average daily rates, and RevPAR, which is a revenue per available room. Those numbers are in the tank, and those are business numbers. Those are numbers that help that determine whether or not a lodging property is going to be successful. And attractions in the state, while open, are in the process of reopening. They're under the same kind of guidelines where they have restricted capacities. If a theme park can typically have 30,000 people, then the maximum they can have now is probably around 7,500. Well, the problem with that is they're not even meeting those numbers right now. So there's some real issues right now with, and that's going to get particularly, now that schools are open, that's going to be even more challenging for the attractions. As Keith was talking about earlier, with things like the agritourism, typically would have school trips, those types of things. That's not going to be happening this fall. And all of this has to do with, quite honestly, Commissioner, it has to do with the hesitancy, understandable hesitancy on the part of the American public to travel right now. There's a real pent-up desire to travel, but there is an inherent hesitancy to do that. The latest study by Longwoods, which is a tourism research organization out of Colorado, actually, and their national study shows that there's just what we thought was going to happen this fall when there'd be an uptick in travel. The hesitancy is still out there, and a lot of it has to do with mixed messages. Different destinations have different levels of infection. Different destinations have different levels of restrictions or different protocols. So the traveling public is just kind of saying, we don't know. We don't know what's safe. We don't know where to go. We don't know what to do once we get there. So there's a real hesitancy with those confusing messages. That uptick, that fall uptick, is just doesn't seem to be materializing. It was interesting, though. I saw a study just earlier this week by a group of experts. The hotel industry, back 2 or 3 months ago, instituted a program called Stay Safe, and it really puts in a whole new set of protocols. If you thought rooms were clean a year ago in a hotel, they're sanitized now. They're sterile, and there are restrictions in place about, and that I think will stay in place for a long time. You used to get daily maid service. That won't happen. Your room, when you enter the room, it's actually a sealed room. You have to break the seal to get into it, and once you do, nobody else is supposed to go in that room but you. You can get refresh on towels and things like that, but you won't get daily maid service. And the study actually said that a hotel is probably one of the least likely, a hotel room is probably one of the least likely places to catch COVID right now. So that's interesting. It just has the messaging has to get out there to folks. And that's where we come down to what y'all have been talking about. As Commissioner Hatcher and Keith were talking about just a moment ago, we're excited about the fact that The business relief program announced by Governor Lee last week also includes tourism. It's a tremendous program. The tourism side of things got $25 million to be used to, it has a specific requirement. It has to be used for marketing. It cannot be used for operations. It can't be used for personnel. It has to be used on marketing. A portion of that's going to go to the Department of Tourist Development for their marketing. But what we're very excited about is the majority of it is actually going out to every single community destination in the state, the big ones and the small ones, the urban and the rural. Every destination, every community in the state that has a tourism program is going to get a portion of this money to market the concept of how to travel safely to Nashville, how to travel safely to Bell Buckle, whatever the community may be. The messaging is there that it's safe to travel here. Here's, as we were talking about earlier, people are confused. This is going to help to clear up some of that confusion. And just as Keith was saying, we're under the same gun here, as it were, in that this has to be fast tracked. Every bit of this has to be. The money has to, the plan has to be in place. The community has to do the marketing, and all the paperwork has to be in by December 30. So it's very much going to be a fast track process. The reason I'm going to get off this call and go to the next one is I'm supposed to be on a call with Commissioner Ezell of Tourism and some of the Convention and Visitors Bureaus in the state to talk about the process of how do we do this. So we're going to be working with the department to fast track that. To where our association is going to be partnering with the Department of Tourist Development to offer that same kind of help to communities who are going to have to go through the paperwork process and the planning process. So we see it as a real partnership with the state to make that happen. But we're excited about it. It is a game changer, we think, for our industry in the state. So we're excited about that, and that's what we're going to be doing for the next several weeks as well, is focusing on that. We'll be starting with the department a series of online webinars on how to do it and how to get the money back. But we are delighted that Governor Lee chose to help support not only the state's first largest business, which is agriculture, but its second largest business, which is tourism, in this program. So, and I'm delighted I was on this call because I'm going to tell Commissioner Ezell and those that are on there, I didn't realize that through ag, there was monies available for agritourism operations and wineries and ag fairs, those types of things, which are very tourist related. And I'm going to make sure that our industry, we do have a lot of agritourism members. We have a lot of wineries that are members and expos. So we're going to make sure that they know about it as well. So thank you for letting me be on the call. And not only share my information, but to get some information this morning. And I'll be glad to answer any questions, Commissioner Hatcher, if you have any, or if any of your folks have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
I've got one. So I think most people are assuming that we're in this through 2020. Would that be safe?
Yes, sir. Yes, I think so.
I just wonder how's the industry going to look after this?
It's going to be a changed industry, I think, Commissioner. It's the new normal, as it is for everybody, every business. It's just going to be a different normal. Right now you have to have a reservation to get into Dollywood. You have to follow certain protocols if you're going to go into a hotel. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that change into early 21. I think we'll see some let up, perhaps. I think a lot of it depends on the research on the disease, on the possibility of a vaccine, those types of things. We may see a return to small meetings, which is important. It'll be very interesting to see whether or not large conventions come back, certainly in early 21, perhaps into the fall of 21. But yeah, most predictions right now is that our industry is going to it's going to take us till probably 22, 23 to get back up to where we were in 19. So it's going to be a long-term process. And a lot of it, Commissioner, is just It's all based on consumer confidence. You know, when people are ready to travel, when they feel safe traveling, then we like to travel, and we feel like the industry will come. So that's
that did prompt a question from Farm Bureau. So are there any national templates on how to safely have convention type meetings?
There are through U.S. Travel Association, USTA.org. There are some through Destinations International. There are some through American Society of Association Executives, ASAE. And there are guidelines out there. They're still in the process. It just cuts down, Commissioner, to how do you logistically operate a conference of 1,000 people. When
you still got to have social distancing and decreased attendance and all that. So it's just tough.
Our governor's conference this year, which we produced, the Tennessee Governor's Conference on Hospitality and Tourism, we made the decision back in the summer to take that virtual, and now we're changing that again because of the business development monies. We need to get that information out there more than anything else. We have rescheduled the in-person conference for fall of 21. So we have that optimism that we'll be able to meet again. And ours is not a huge conference. It's about 500 or 600 people. But if we can meet safely in the fall of 21, then I think that'll be a big statement going forward. We support our hotels. We support our industry, the meetings industry, but we also have to be safe. And we have to have our people have to be willing and confident that they can meet safely.
Hey, John, could you send any of that guidance to Tina so she can get it to Farm Bureau?
I certainly will. I'll be glad to.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for being with us. We're going to move on, and hopefully we can get another update, maybe in another meeting or two away.
Yes, sir. I'll look forward to it. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being on.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Hatcher,
Yes.
do you want me to go ahead? That's exactly what I was going to talk about while we're on that subject, or I can wait, either one. That was what my update was about.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. That'd be fine. We'll jump to you.
Okay. That'll help me a little bit too with my schedule. Yeah, we just wanted to tell.
You want to tell them who you are?
Yeah, this Jennifer Houston, immediate past president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. We did have a summer meeting in Denver at the end of July. We normally have about 600 people at that meeting. Certainly not as big as our annual meeting, which is scheduled to come to Nashville 1st of February. We'll still see. We haven't canceled that yet.
Thank
but
you.
we had about 400 and plus people in person in Denver at the Gaylord, Gaylord of the Rockies. They were very cooperative. We were their first big meeting that they had hosted. We had to get dispensation from Colorado to have this meeting, but I think after it's over, and we've been long enough since then to where we have had, sort of like you talked about Bristol, no reports of problems. But what we did, we had a virtual component that if people didn't want to travel or couldn't travel, because like other commodity groups, a lot of our members are older, but they had our stations set up 6 feet apart. There was no more than 100 people in any ballroom, no matter how big the ballroom was. For our board meeting, actually, we used 3 ballrooms. Technology was a big part of it, to be able to wire for audio and video into those overflow rooms, if you want to call them that. There is a mask mandate in Colorado, so all of the public areas, hallways, masks were worn, and I was real proud of our Cowboys. They did a good job with that, although there was a little grumbling, of course. In the meetings, like I said, you were 6 feet apart, whether you were a spectator in the meeting or a committee member. We asked people not to move the chairs any closer around, and they didn't. At all the meal settings, the tables, again, we had overflow rooms. The tables, instead of 8 and 10 tops, were set up in 4 and 6 tops. Everybody was supposed to stay socially distanced, except when eating or drinking they could take their mask off. And it was a triumph of technology. I don't know how it would work for bigger ones, but I think it is a template for how you can do it. I flew out there, felt very safe. I've on Delta. I can't speak for other airlines. No middle seats were sold. The sanitation was good. They loaded from the back. They made sure, even in some of the airports, particularly Atlanta, every other seat was not taken even in the waiting area. So it can be done. It's tough. It costs a lot of money, extra money. You have to have the facility willing. Like was talked about, the rooms had no maid service. We didn't have to break a seal. I don't remember that, but all the room service was, box stuff that they basically brought to your door or set outside your door. But it worked very well. We had some things that we had not been able to solve via Zoom over the spring that we felt we needed the in-person. So it was sort of a trial balloon, if you want to call it that. But it really worked well. And like I said, we haven't canceled. It sounded really doubtful listening to the previous presenter, but we haven't yet canceled our annual meeting in Nashville. But that's up to about 9,000 people. So we will see as the fall goes on, not only our farmers and ranchers, but our exhibitors. But it went well. The other things we continue to work on, your state money on packing plants. We're also working with 3 bits of legislation federally to help try to get more meat processing capacity. We've been told, and I'm sure that Mike's going to talk to you about the last of the CFAP, and we'll continue to work on phase 2 of the what that looks like for agriculture on a federal basis. That's still one of our top priorities. So just wanted to give everybody an update that there is a template for how not the biggest meeting, but still a large meeting can be handled safely if all parties want to work together.
Thank you, Jennifer. And go to the chat. You'll see where John wants you to get with him.
Okay.
Talk more about the meeting.
I sure will. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll move to Washington, D.C. I think Max is on. We'll see if he's got a beard or not this time.
I still do. I'm still rocking the beard, and it's starting to cool down a little bit here. So I'm hoping that I can keep it through the fall. Anyways, thanks, Commissioner, for having me. Hi, everybody. Hope we're staying safe and doing well. A couple updates, I think, from my end. But before I get into that, Commissioner, I just wanted to congratulate you and the department on trying to stand up that program that will give direct relief to producers, and also your governor for giving you the funds. It's great to see that support for agriculture in the state, and it certainly has not been the case across the country. So we've got a number of states who haven't gotten any funds from their governor and have advocated for it, but it hasn't always been forthcoming. So big kudos to your state, and it's a big testament to how important you all see the agriculture and forestry sector. So just wanted to call that out. I think as the days have gone on in DC, it's gotten more and more clear that we might not even have a 4th package for coronavirus relief come together. The annual appropriation cycle is another thing that we can usually count on, but that looks like it might not come together either. So we'll see how this all progresses. There's a number of proposals out, but I think the most likely scenario that I can foresee right now is a continuing resolution that would essentially fund the government beyond the deadline of September 30th for a couple months, just to get us through the election, essentially. And there might be some additional coronavirus relief packages attached to that rider, but we're not sure. I mean, we got to see, and I think some of the Republicans have been talking about doing a shortened version of the relief package that would give a modest boost in unemployment benefits and also some liability protection and some of the other priorities they've been talking about. I think they also called out about $10 billion for the Postal Service, which has been a flash button issue here of late. But with the convention starting, folks might have tuned into the Democratic National Convention the last couple nights, and I think that's just been where the attention is starting to lie now that we've got an August recess and folks are away, and the presidential election is looking closer every day. So we'll see how it all pans out, but I'm not hopeful for a broad package. I think we're more likely to see a short-term extension of government funding and folks trying to pile on to whatever they can in that last kind of extension. From NASA's perspective, we're still working to make sure that we can have some dedicated funding for the food and agriculture value chain attached to that final rider. We'll see if that happens. There's been some real skepticism, I would say, on the part of some in Congress on actually providing state agriculture departments with dedicated resources, because the line they keep saying to us is, well, the governors have a lot of money, they've got a lot of money they haven't used. So if that's the case, just talk to your governor. Again, I mean, I think we've gone over a few times why that doesn't always work for agriculture, but nonetheless, I think if it's not direct funding to states, I think there'll still be opportunities for states to access some of the resources, whether it's on specific issues like worker protection or trying to provide more relief to businesses that are going to be struggling this fall. And so we'll see how that all comes together. I know NASA is definitely pushing to make sure that states have some access to resources, even if it's not direct funding, if they're eligible to apply for some of the programs that are being considered. So we'll see how that all comes to be. Workforce protection has by far, I think, in DC been the biggest debate I've been hearing in the agriculture sector. How do we make sure that throughout the harvest season, our workers are protected and all the way up throughout the food and agriculture value chain? But again, it's not really clear what federal action can be taken here, or what folks are willing to put in place. So right now, it's been left up to the states to kind of determine that, and I'm sure Tennessee's been thinking about that as well. But it certainly looks a little bleak in terms of comprehensive next package. So that's kind of where we're at. I know Jennifer mentioned some of the meat processing legislation, and that certainly has a chance to move as well. She probably has a lot more details in the nitty gritty than me, but I think suffice it to say, there's still a big appetite for folks to figure out how we can really expand the meat processing sector and poultry processing sector. And so we've been looking at a number of different legislative proposals that might help with that process overall. So I'm happy to answer questions, Commissioner, but I think it's getting a little more political and less policy focused these days in the district.
Yeah, Max, I've seen where, gosh, at least half a dozen states have taken some of the CARES money for meat processing capacity. We got, somebody sent me something on, was it Montana? So I know Montana, Oklahoma, maybe North Carolina and Tennessee, and maybe a couple more.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that list sounds about right. I'm not sure if Nebraska was as well. I know they had used some of their CARES Act money to provide direct payments to producers in the livestock.
Yeah, they did.
But yeah, I mean, still, after Tennessee, at our count, still only about 15 states have gotten money to their ag departments related to from that CARES Act pot. So there's still a lot of states out there that are still kind of trying to figure out how they can funnel some of those money to the food and agriculture value chain.
Okay, well, we appreciate the update. I'm not seeing any questions. And we appreciate you being on, Max, as usual. Always
my pleasure. Look forward to joining you again.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to Dr. Phil. Hopefully it's a good report. Dr. Phil, are you on? Good morning.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, let me just share my screen here.
Are you feeling pretty good about things? No.
I'm feeling pretty good about things, Commissioner.
Okay, good. Yes.
All right, so I'll be fairly brief and walk you through some of the similar trends that we've looked at in the past. So just as a reminder, and sort of looking at the overall state picture, as of yesterday, we're approaching 136,000 cases in Tennessee with about 1,400 deaths. I just want to remind everyone about this critical indicators report that involves and includes a lot of the metrics that I update here every couple of weeks, except it's updated weekly on the website on Fridays. So people can peruse that at their leisure. So again, to start with looking at our non-specific symptom data, we see, sorry, I'm trying to hide my pop-up there, that we continue to see low levels of both COVID-like illness and influenza-like illness across the state. So this blue line, if you recall, we had an increase and sort of a peak in our COVID-like illness in emergency departments from late May to late June. That's continued to decline. And similarly, we saw a very subtle little rise in influenza-like illness around the same time period that has since declined and remained low. When we look at our actual case count, so this is the epidemic curve by specimen collection date, we see really a nice steady downward trend over the last couple of weeks after that really precipitous decline in June and much of July. I think it's helpful to look at this by report date by week, and we can see a little bit more clearly there that sort of plateau here from weeks 28 to 30, and then a slight decline in weeks 32 and 33 rather. We're in the midst of week 34, so a little bit too early to draw any conclusions there. I do want to share some more granular data from across the state to show really how marked some of these trends have been. So in Memphis, Shelby County, first starting all the way there in far west Tennessee, you see that in the most recent 2 weeks, Shelby County is averaging about 225 new cases a day. That's down from almost 350 new cases a day in the 2 weeks prior. So a really nice decline there. Similarly, when we look at Nashville, we see about 190 new cases a day over the last 2 weeks as compared to 215 cases a day in the 2 weeks prior. So again, a pretty precipitous decline for Nashville here from really early to mid-July, from mid-July down and now through early August, where we've been plateaued a little bit over the last couple of weeks. When we look at the rest of Middle Tennessee, so these are all of the surrounding counties except for Davidson in Middle Tennessee, we see similar trends. So down from almost 330 cases a day to now around 250 cases a day, and that's been holding pretty steady. And this is not just a trend that we see in the metro areas. So we're seeing this now in some of the rural parts of the state. So this is the trends for East Tennessee. It's actually even more marked there. They're now seeing about 150 new cases a day as compared to 260 in the 2 weeks prior. So their plateau was a little bit later, late July, early August, but has been a fairly steep downward trend over the last couple of weeks. Oh, sorry. And so, but I do want to say that in about, and let me feel my notes here, in about 7 of our 13 public health jurisdictions, we continue to see basically stable or maybe slightly increasing trends in a couple of areas. So, you know, fortunately, the trends are overall, I think, going in the right direction, but it's not uniform across the whole state. We still are seeing, in general, perhaps more stably higher rates of disease in some of our rural areas, whereas we're seeing more of a precipitous decline in some of the metro areas. But again, overall, I think an improving and reassuring and encouraging trend that we're seeing across the state. So these are our number of active cases. Again, this trend has gone upward, and then we have really been sort of plateaued for the last couple of weeks in this trend. And then I want to talk a little bit about testing. So if you recall, you know, we had this really precipitous increase in testing in late June, early July, that really continued to rise for much of July. We've seen it also a bit of a plateau in the volume of testing. We're now doing around 20,000 tests a day, whereas previously we were as high as 30,000 tests in some days. But even with that slightly decreased testing volume as compared to several weeks ago, we actually now are also seeing a declining percent of tests that are positive. And so that, I think, is the second half of that conversation that's really important. Sometimes it's hard to know if we're seeing less cases because less people are being tested, but if we're seeing less cases, even if there's less testing, but the percent of tests that are positive are also declining, that's certainly encouraging of less disease present in the community. So our cumulative percent positive now has stabilized at around 8.5%. Yesterday was our lowest daily percent positive in quite some time, just over 5%, but our 7-day average is about 8.6%, which is down from a 7-day average of almost 10.5% a month or so ago. So again, I think that's also an encouraging trend that we're seeing. We do have over 1,400 deaths reported now. As you can see, that was certainly a higher number and has continued to be a higher number in the last few weeks. Obviously, deaths are a severely lagging indicator, so it's going to take some time, even after we see case rates decline and hospitalization stabilize, to see that start to downtrend or plateau. Our overall case fatality rate is still just about 1%, and our 30-day case fatality rate is just under 1%. And then lastly, of course, to touch on healthcare resources. So we now, and we really have been stable at around 1,000 or so hospitalized patients across the state since really late June. We extended the time frame on this graph a little bit on the website because I think it's helpful to look back to early June and see that we were down below 700 hospitalizations. So we're still at a higher level than we were previously, but fortunately this has been very stable for the last couple of weeks. So just over 1,000 hospitalized, 330 in ICUs, and 163 ventilated patients. And this represents about 11% or so of all hospitalized patients statewide. Overall, hospital assets are very stable and not any concerns about substantial strain of the healthcare system. And then, I just want to close and remind everyone of the same things that we've been talking about for weeks. These things are incredibly effective, so they're worth repeating. Avoiding large groups and gatherings and confined spaces, trying to maintain 6 feet of distance from others. Of course, staying home when sick, seeking testing if you're feeling ill or unwell, washing your hands and using alcohol-based hand rub frequently, and frequently disinfecting high-touch objects, and then wearing a face covering. And I'm sure most of you have now seen these billboards and commercials on TV of the new Face It Mask Fight COVID campaign. And just a reminder that toolkit is available online for those of you that run your own businesses or are leaders in your communities. This information is easy to share on social media channels and whatever other realm is out there that is useful. So I think that's all that I have. I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to take any questions that folks have.
Do you see that chat question?
Yeah, so I see one about people wearing masks and washing their hands often.
I don't think there's anything about being a normal life these days, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, it's I agree, Commissioner. It kind of depends on your definition of normal. I mean, I think undoubtedly if people practice frequent hand washing, staying home when sick, wearing a face covering, that their risk of contracting COVID is much lower. I think it's important to, again, reinforce that also includes avoiding large gatherings and maintaining 6 feet of distance from other people. Because even if you're wearing a mask, if you're in a very tight, close space with poor ventilation and a lot of people, there's still the potential for transmission there. So, I think, again, none of these actions by themselves are 100% effective or a silver bullet. It's really a constellation of all of them that are the most effective. And I think, everyone has to decide their own risk tolerance. And, some people that are higher risk or have high risk family members in their home or folks that they are in close contact with, you might take these to the extreme. Other folks, might do exactly what you said and, wash hands aggressively and wear a face covering, but otherwise, maybe not be quite as aggressive about other measures. And, I think we have to acknowledge that there's still a little bit of risk there, but undoubtedly less so if you're doing those things than if you were to do nothing.
Yeah, but for mostly all the outbreaks are tied to close contact, party, or some.
Yeah,
right?
so I think there's undoubtedly growing evidence that, it is those close contacts, indoor settings where we see the higher risk of transmission. So there has been very little, really no notable examples that I can think of of clusters or outbreaks in outdoor settings.
Yeah.
So I think, that's important to keep in mind. Now, some of that remains to be seen, but by far and away, it's, again, closer indoor settings where ventilation might not be as good, where we see much higher risk.
Yeah, but if you want no risk, you just need to lock yourself up.
Yeah, well, maybe not lock yourself up, but I think
well, you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, this is really a paradigm shift for all of us. It's, when you're at the grocery store trying to take an extra step or two back from the person in front of you and stay a little bit further away, or, doing, contactless pickup of your to-go order instead of going in and standing inside for 20 minutes waiting for it to be made. You know, those little choices have an impact, and I think a lot of it's just retraining our brains and our routines to make that normal.
And you still want to protect that high-risk group.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what we all have to think about is that, you know, we're still seeing that about 20% or so of people don't exhibit symptoms. And so, but they're infectious to others. And so, you know, it's not just making those choices for yourself, it's making those choices for, you know, your in-laws that might live with you that are older,
right.
or, you know, grandparents that might watch your child for you, you know, a couple times a week, or whoever it may be that you have interaction with that could be at risk if you were to be one of those folks that were infected and infectious and not know it.
I've got two quick questions. What are the models predicting between now and the end of the year? Are you looking at those?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I haven't looked at them that far out. You know, I think, you know, we've worked really closely with the health policy group at Vanderbilt and the modeling that they've done. I haven't seen an updated model looking just at case trends. They've been watching hospitalizations more closely. But I'm happy to get with them and try to get an updated prediction, and I can circle back on that next time I speak to this group.
See that school question?
So comment on schools that have opened and closed. You know, I think, you know, opening of schools is a learning experience for everyone. You know, I think we're seeing really a spectrum where some schools are being extremely aggressive with their, you know, partnership with public health and their contact tracing, and, you know, anyone that potentially could have been exposed to a case is being either excluded, or they're closing down classrooms or wings or whatnot. I don't know specifically about where most of those exposures are happening. Most of that communication happens with our local health departments, and we have, you know, lots of communication with them, but they know perfectly well how to define a close contact and how to help provide that guidance to the school systems. So, you know, I think a lot of the guidance and recommendations that have been put out have been about trying to incorporate these very principles that, you know, we talked about today into the daily operations of a school, trying to keep students safe, trying to have good ventilation, trying to ensure that no sick students are coming to school. You know, we encourage face coverings for students of a certain age. So all of those things I think are important and help decrease the risk of transmission in that setting.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That is an encouraging report. That's better than a few weeks ago.
It is better than a few weeks ago, I agree. All right,
okay.
you guys take care.
Well, thank you so much. See, Dr. Muhammad.
Yes, I'm on. Let's share screen here. Share. Alrighty, let's go. Slideshow from the beginning. All right, can you all see that just fine? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see you.
Yes, see it fine.
All right, so I want to just give a few updates. The June numbers out in terms of Tennessee agricultural and forestry exports. In one instance, particularly in the case of cotton, things look a lot better. Forestry, not so much. So I want to just give some overview as well, sort of how we got here. And so just to give you a quick sort of overview of what we've exported just annually over the last couple of years. And that's to the left of the dotted line. And then our year-to-date exports by product category for last year in this particular year to the right. And so these are broken down according to these broad categories by USDA. So bulk agricultural commodities, which is in black here, that category. And that includes cotton, corn. For the state of Tennessee, a big part of that is cotton. One of our leading export categories in years past has been what the USDA has considered to be sort of related products, and that's going to be sort of forestry products in distilled spirits. And the point that I want you to see there is how much it's declined since 2017. And most of this is due to the trade war and how it's particularly impacted forestry products. And so declining from about a little less than $1 billion to about $620 million in 2019. So that's just to give you an idea of sort of what's happened in past years on an annual basis. And now if we just simply look at these broad categories year to date, so bulk commodities down. So this is just sort of at this point in June, and how do we compare to at this same point last year? So Tennessee's bulk commodity exports down over 100 million. Related products down even more so. But the main thing to think about related products is that they've already taken a significant hit. And then consumer-oriented products are also down. This tends to be processed foods and sort of products ready for human consumption. All right, so if we just sort of look at how do we compare as a state nationally relative to say what's going on with U.S. exports overall. So for both agriculture and related products, nationally, we're down about 4%. For the state of Tennessee, we're down about 17%. For just agriculture, how the USDA defines it, so that's not going to include forestry or distilled spirits or ethanol, that's down nationally about 3%. For the state of Tennessee, we're down about 21%. All right, so one of the things you could see is that in terms of state exports, that the state has been impacted more so than sort of national exports, at least when we compare this sort of COVID-19 period with the same period the previous year. Here's a breakdown of just exports by these individual products so you can actually see. So what I'm doing here is comparing January to June 2020 to January to June 2019. And the point I want you to see here is where we've suffered the biggest loss has been in terms of cotton exports, right? And so that's down about $118 million, 27%. A huge loss for the state has been forest product exports, right, down from about 95 million to about 69 million. And that's just sort of for the first 6 months, down about 27%. We're not a big meat exporting state, but we have benefited from increased poultry exports to China. And so that's actually up. So broiler exports and chicken meat exports are up for the state about 8%. But here's the other categories have been slammed quite hard, particularly dairy. Like dairy exports are down almost, well, nearly 90%, 87%. Pork exports down about 42%, and beef exports down 67%. All right, and so as I mentioned, there is some sign of a recovery for bulk agricultural exports, and that's primarily because cotton has recovered. I'll say a little bit about that in the next couple of slides and why I think that's the case. But we do see June as at least an improvement. Still less than June in sort of the previous years, 2017 to 2019. But my hope is that this is the start of a recovery for exports for the state. And the July numbers will be out a month from now. So this next meeting coming up, but the following meeting, I should have those numbers. And we should be able to see sort of if this is the beginning of an upward trend. Now, but here's the thing, forest products are still in decline. And so note two things. So one is the fact that, so even as of April, there's been some decline from about, say, 13 million to about 10 million. And you could see that this purple line, which is Tennessee forest product exports in 2020, how much lower that is compared to 2019, which is the green line. And then the other thing to note is how much lower 2019 was compared to 2018 and 17. So you have this trade war effect in 2019, and then now you have this further effect that's really hurting the forest sector in the state of Tennessee solely due to COVID-19. All right, so here's some of the things to explain it is obviously is what's going on in the final product market. And so here I have a slide of, these are just month-to-month percentage changes since COVID-19 was first started. And so if you see like these so January to February, that's the, how much did retail sales change in February compared to January? The next is how much did sales change in March compared to February? And one thing I want you to see is the March to April. That clothing and apparel were down, sales in the US was down about 80% from March to April, right? We're talking about sort of the sales almost going to zero. And furniture sales down about 50%. Now, both have recovered, but note that furniture sales have not recovered as much as clothing and apparel. And clearly, we're talking about the delays in the production process. It's much easier to produce clothing than, say, furniture and home furnishings in terms of the time. But the point is that we have seen the recovery, and that then may lead to an uptick in, say, the forest product exports data maybe the next month. We'll see. Lastly, I haven't said much these last couple of meetings about what's going on with soybeans. This time period isn't really our peak period for soybean exports. And the first thing I want you to sort of see is how we compare just over the last couple of years, where 2017, we're a long way off from that due to issues related to the trade war, but just sort of removing 2017 to get a better look at what's going on with 2020. So even during this down period, U.S. soybean exports, and this is for the U.S., it's a little hard to talk about Tennessee soybean exports because we don't get the full credit for what we export because it gets consolidated on the river and often attributed to the state of Louisiana. But the point is that U.S. soybean exports are lower than previous periods, even during this down period. And so overall, we do see some positive news for Tennessee in terms of bulk commodities, particularly cotton. Obviously, poultry is looking good for both the United States as well as the state of Tennessee. But some things, at least that I've been looking at moving forward, is some pending trade agreements. And so it seemed, I've been in a few meetings, so we're progressing with this new agreement with the United Kingdom, sort of in spite of the things they have to work out with the European Union in terms of Brexit, but that seems to be progressing. Something that I'm also excited about is this agreement with Kenya. And if any of you know, that country is sort of the gateway into East Africa, and it's our first time engaging that continent in terms of a bilateral trade agreement. And so I'm excited about the potential there. I read some stuff that Tennessee whiskey is actually sort of the preferred distilled spirit beverage. And so there's a lot there for wine, beer, and spirit exports from the state. And then obviously we had the implementation of USMCA, and what's still sort of on the table is whether or not the Chinese can actually live up to what they agreed to with the Phase 1 trade agreement. And that seems to be now less likely. However, the Chinese are still committed. And like I said last meeting, we do see some evidence of that with U.S. poultry exports to China. So with that, thank you. I'll stop. Let me see if I could. There we go.
Yeah, you know, I was, your last report was very sobering, and this one is too. One of these days, it's going to look better, right?
Yeah, it will. But I would say bulk commodities in June seem to be looking pretty good. And so if we can get that same uptick in July, then that's really going to bode well for the state, obviously. Mind you, this is sort of hindsight looking back, but it's pretty clear that we may see some recovery in bulk commodities moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much. I'm not seeing any questions, and I think Dr. Smith has agreed in the interest of time to skip him this time, so that'll work.
Okay.
We'll move on to Corey with the department for an update, followed by Carol. Corey, are you on?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Good morning, everyone. I will be very brief because much of our primary communications focus has already been covered. The CASB, we have, of course, that direct link to the external website that includes the application information. But if you're not able to remember that particular direct link, we also have a link to it from our main website, tn.gov/agriculture. And it is the very first item right at the top of our page in the big image slider bar. You can click on that, and then that takes you to a page that has the link to the application process and the frequently asked questions and all of the information you might need for that program. So we wanted to put that in a very easily accessible, very obvious location. We also have it and have been sharing it extensively on our social media, and we will continue to do so. So I ask you, please go ahead and, bookmark those links. Be sure to share our social media posts because obviously, as was mentioned earlier, we want to get that $50 million out the door. So we really need your help to be able to amplify that message and that availability. The only other thing that I'll add, and I don't think I got to talk about it on the last meeting in interest of time, so I'll just revisit it briefly. We have created a toolkit on our website. It's under our coronavirus response and resources, or COVID-19 response and resources page. And we have a toolkit there that I encourage you to use and share. It includes, we added some materials a couple weeks ago. We have an explainer booklet that the Department of Health put together that talked about, good tips and best practices for avoiding or slowing the spread of COVID-19, specifically in agricultural environments. We all know that agriculture has some unique challenges that other businesses may not face. So Health put together a booklet that's specifically focused to ag. Then we also have handouts and posters, and there are tips for ag operators. These are the business owners or the farmers that we're directing that messaging to. We've got flyers and we've got posters for tips on preventing the spread. And then we also have separate flyers and posters directed towards farm workers. And the great thing about that we're really proud of is we've also created those documents in Spanish as well. So we have English and Spanish versions. We have posters and one-page flyers that you can simply print off from our website. Or we have also created the posters we have in laminated form, and they came out really nicely. I'm pretty excited about them. So if you're interested in having any posters at your ag business, please let me know. We'll be glad to get those out to you. Again, these are laminated posters directed toward ag workers in both English and Spanish. And then the other part of the toolkit that we added is we actually have Spanish language videos that, again, are directed toward ag workers. We have 3 different videos with tips and best practices to help prevent or slow the spread of COVID-19. Again, that's something that, we collaborated with Health on. We collaborated with some of our other partners, and one of our staff members who is a Spanish speaker, a lot of different staff members actually contributed to making sure everything was phrased appropriately and pronounced appropriately. So we're really proud of those items. Again, that is on our website, tn.gov/agriculture. If you go to our COVID-19 response and resources page, our toolkit is right up near the top. And that is my update, Commissioner.
Corey, and I would encourage all of you to go to our website. We've got a lot of good guidance on there. I looked at it last night, and it's relevant and it could help you. Let's see, Carol, are you on?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. On a legislative front, as you all know, a special session of the General Assembly was held last week. They adjourned on Wednesday after addressing COVID-19 issues that Governor Lee had called the special session for, and that was for the Tennessee COVID-19 Recovery Act of liability protections, telehealth services legislation, and laws governing state capitol grounds. So that was all addressed and passed during the special session. Also, next week, relating to COVID, we have 2 emergency rules from the department that will be heard next Wednesday. One relates to commercial applicators, and the other is a requirement that all swine entering a slaughter market must have a USDA approved ear tag. And then also we have sunset hearings on Tuesday for 8 of our ag boards and commissions. So if anybody, those mostly promotion boards, anybody has any questions on those, please let me know. As far as a mental health update, Misty could not be on the call today, but she wanted me to report there was a really good report that was released last week or on August the 14th by the CDC, and it's got a lot of good information, but due to our time constraint, I won't go through all the different points that was brought out in that report, but if you'd like a link to that, please let me know and I will get it to you. But it's important that we realize to identify potential anxiety and stress as a major component of helping others, and we need to help each other and be aware of what's going on, help our neighbors and helping our farmers. And many of the members of the TSPN's Farm Suicide Prevention Task Force are on this call, so I want to provide a shout out to those members that help formulate resources geared to farmers. We have a brochure and a wallet card that is available for anyone. So please let me know if I can get these materials to you. If you've got meetings coming up or anything that you, any place you would like to share these resources, I'd be glad to get them to you. And just to remind you all, the Tennessee statewide crisis line is 855-274-7471. And that's my report, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. I appreciate those comments. You know, this is, I can't think of a more stressful time in history than what we're going through right now. But yeah, what Carol said, be aware of your neighbor and your friends and who you deal with so that, and help them the best you can. Let's see. I think we'll go to Tennessee Farm Bureau next. I'm not sure if Jeff or Radonna or both are on.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. Very briefly, last Thursday and Friday, we held what I believe was a very successful and informational President's Conference. A lot of those on the call took part, and we thank all of you for your participation in that. We had about half of our usual attendance, but we tried to follow all the safety protocols that we could possibly put in place, and I think it went well. I also might report that this week we have begun our policy development process, have held 4 meetings thus far, or will have held 4 meetings by the end of this week, and those meetings will continue over the next 2 weeks, and it's always a interesting time to hear what's on the minds of farmers and producers all across the state. Might also mention that we expect Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary Azar, to be in Tennessee early next week to assess and discuss the COVID-19 impacts. Commissioner, that would be our report.
That was quick, Jeff. That's good. All right, thank you very much. And we'll move to Mike Mayfield, and I believe he's on WebEx. Mike, you got any money left?
Can you hear me, Mr. Commissioner?
Yes.
Yes, we're still working hard to get as many funds out the door as we possibly can. I'll try to be brief as well. The CFAP program did get extended through September the 11th with the addition of a couple of new avenues, one being the nursery industry. Hopefully today we will finalize who is actually going to be eligible and to participate in that, so we can begin to really push the outreach for those persons. And for those that are in the sheep industry, it was changed to add the addition of mature sheep. So we will be reaching out to add those additional numbers to those producers that have applications in the program for sheep. Just as a note, we did release the additional 20% that had been held in reserve under the CFAP program to all producers that were participating and already had approved applications. So basically, we released about $20 million in one large sum over the weekend. So producers should be expecting those dollars to be hitting bank accounts sometime today or tomorrow. We're trying to approve those as fast as we possibly can in county offices. Was somewhat of an overwhelming job, as it released somewhere around some 16 or 17,000 payments in one lump in the state of Tennessee. To date, we now have expended $120 million in the state of Tennessee through the CFAP program in the last 83 days. So I got to brag on my people for the yeoman's job that in getting that program out the door. There's already talk, I think it was mentioned earlier, about a CFAP 2. We do expect that to be coming. We don't have any specific details about that as of yet, or a date. But we do expect that is in the wings. It has been mentioned by the secretary in some appearances that he has made. And as soon as we have more specific details about that, we will certainly be reaching out to our partners to help us in implementing that new round of CFAP. I think it will be a little bit more targeted, and I will try to share as many more details as I can with that down the road. Two other pieces of information I want to share. We did wrap up our acreage reporting this past Friday. We have a few offices that will continue to take them into this week due to the fact we had to close those down in last week operations due to COVID outbreaks. So we will be closing up with them sometime this week. A note in that, out of the acres that we had reported, there is 257,000 acres in the state of Tennessee that were prevented from planting this spring because of various and sundry reasons, primarily that had to do with weather. So that was a little larger number than we had expected. And to date, in this fiscal year, through direct payment programs through the Farm Service Agency in the state of Tennessee, we have issued $399.1 million to producers throughout Tennessee agriculture, and we have provided $377.7 million worth of credit, either through direct guaranteed loans, marketing assistant loans, or farm storage facility loans. So again, I want to brag on the FSA staff for getting those jobs completed and that support out there to Tennessee agriculture. In the essence of time, I'm going to wrap it up there. If there's any questions for me, and I appreciate the opportunity, Commissioner.
That's amazing. You said almost $400 million.
Yes, sir. 400 million through direct programs. Yes.
That's crazy. I mean, that's crazy good. That's amazing.
It's amazing the support that through these programs we've been able to inject into Tennessee agriculture. And honestly, I believe we're going to see some more sometime this fall, but I just don't know the definition of what those are going to look like.
That's good. Thank you. I'm not sure if Jim Tracy's on. If you are, Jim, speak up. Oh. Okay, we'll go to Tim Williams.
Good morning, Commissioner and everyone. It's great to be with you today, and thank you for the opportunity for updates. Things are going pretty well. Loan demand has continued to be good for farmers and ranchers in Tennessee. Over the last week or so, we have seen some slowing in that regard, but we are still serving farmers the best we can with skeleton crews. I'll tell you that, as Mike was talking about, there has been some COVID outbreaks and things, and we've had to mobilize people from across the state to keep people served. And fortunately, we've been able to do that. Right now, we, as like other lenders, we're preparing for the forgiveness of the PPP loans. As people start making applications, the portal was opened, I think, August the 10th. We are preparing for that. We are waiting, like many lenders, on clarity from SBA and to be sure that all the pieces are that we need to know about are handled correctly. So we're going to be working on that soon. One good thing is that people have 10 months to apply for that forgiveness. So there's no real rush to do that. We have time and we want to do it right. And I think there'll be some clarity brought about that'll make it easier and not as difficult maybe to apply using the EZ form and things on loans of small loans. And most of these are pretty small. So I think once we get going, it'll go pretty fast on that. Also, I'm going to get off the call and visit with Keith as he does a webinar for us on the $50 million of funds available for agriculture. And we're going to do our best to get the word out and help people take advantage of that. So thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, everybody on the call, for all you do for agriculture in Tennessee. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate that collaboration, Tim. That'll help us get this money out the door, we hope.
Yes.
All right. So we're nearing the end. If I missed anybody, or is there anybody that's got some last minute comments? I will say that Tina is telling me that the next meeting or next call will be September 2nd, the morning of September 2nd, 9 o'clock, at 9 o'clock. So until next time, let's see. Here's a question. Here's a question for Farm Credit. Do you see that, Tim?
Yes, I do. It says, do you have any insight or confidence that the small loans will get a simpler forgiveness application for Farm Credit? And my confidence level is high on that, Commissioner. I really believe that it'll work out, that these small loans, the process will be pretty streamlined and be pretty quick. We're waiting to be sure we have clarity, but once it comes, I think it'll move pretty fast. So,
When's that expected?
Excuse me, you cut out there just for a moment.
When is the guidance expected on the forgiveness process?
We are hoping that it would come when Congress gets back in. We think that might be some clarity brought about from that group, but pretty quick. The portal was open on the 10th of August, and so they're still working through that. We were hoping in the next 2 or 3 weeks we should get that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. So until next time, we're signing off. Thanks, everybody.